Hey, what's up? It's MaiYang from Mix in the Dark. It has definitely been a minute, and there have been so many changes around me since then. First of all, I had my baby finally. Yay! Baby is healthy and reaching normal milestones. She's pooping, eating, peeing, throwing up, all that good stuff. I was also on maternity leave, and silly me, I really thought that I was going to be able to work on so many projects during this time, including podcasting, but I did absolutely nothing except watch my kids. Lastly, I moved cities. It has been a great move so far. And if you saw my last post, in the process of moving, I actually lost my recording equipment. Lost as in lost in all of our moving things, moving boxes. And so it took me a while. Eventually found it, but I am trialing a new mic. And so what you're listening to now is actually my new mic. I am finally unpacked, but honestly, I'm just ready to have some normal routines again. And one routine that I put back into my life is having my daily dose of Magic Mind. Magic Mind is a mental performance shot. It has helped me in the past by giving me very subtle energy without the shaking and headaches that a regular energy drink usually gives me. I'm hoping that this will help me the same this time around. When I first started with Magic Mind, I actually wasn't sure what to expect from them. I also didn't quite believe that their product would change me in any way. What drew me to the company was actually the story behind it. And as a storyteller, I am just naturally drawn to genuine personal stories. James Bashar is the founder of Magic Mind, and he is the total opposite of me. He loves his coffee, but what happened was he developed a heart condition from the overuse of the caffeine in coffee, and this inspired him to find alternatives to caffeine. He became an expert in nootropics and eventually created this magic formula in a bottle, and he did that by using very natural ingredients. So this little drink was essentially developed to better someone's health, and I trust that. The folks over at Magic Mind are showing some love to my audience by giving us a special discount code. So if you type magicmind.com/inthedark and use my code INTHEDARK, you'll be able to get 20% off for a one-time purchase of Magic Mind products, or 48% off if you opt to subscribe to receive monthly supplies. While you think about all of that, I have 3 stories for you. They all deal with creepy encounters. Maybe these folks just need a little Magic Mind and their lives to clear their thoughts. I don't know. Please enjoy. Story 1. I used to live in a small 2-bedroom house in Sacramento, California, with my parents, grandparents, and 2 younger sisters. One of my sisters, grandma, and I shared a room and a queen-sized bed, while my parents and baby sister had the other room. When my grandpa slept over, he would take the floor. He never complained since the room was too small anyway. My grandpa's health soon declined, and sadly, it overtook him. Although death was hard to comprehend at such a young age, I cried a lot. It was an emotional time for my family. A few days after we laid my grandpa to rest, I suddenly woke up in the middle of the night feeling very uneasy. Because of the big glass sliding door to the backyard, the room was never too dark, especially when the night sky was clear. The moon and stars lit up our room as if we had a nightlight, so I was still able to see my surroundings. That night, I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and saw what looked like shadows. I call them shadows, but they were more like pitch black figures posing like mannequins around the room. I saw a man outlined in a fedora hat with a long trench coat standing by the sliding door with both hands down his sides. A few feet away next to him, directly in front of the glass door, was a shorter lady with the outline of a toddler on her hip. They were dark, very still, and completely silent. It was as if time stood still, and I was the only one in the room who could move. I looked over to the end of the bed by my sister's feet, and there sat another figure. This figure was not like the others. This figure was sitting slightly slouched with the body of a child my age, but its head was oddly large. I saw outlines of what looked like uneven pieces of wavy hair sticking out of its head. But just like the others, this figure was also pitch black and made no sound or movements whatsoever. I sat staring at these figures for probably just a few minutes, but it felt like forever. Suddenly, it occurred to me that maybe this child sitting at the end of the bed was my sister. I leaned forward a little bit and whispered her name, asking if it was her on my bed. Nothing. Even my movement did not cause any slight reaction or sound from them. My gaze suddenly shifted over to my sister's part of the bed, and I saw that she was still sleeping with her back facing me. My grandma was still asleep. This confused me, but the weird thing was, I was not scared. I soon realized that what I was seeing may not be normal, but I slowly laid back down, covered myself with my blanket, and fell back to sleep. The next day, I told my mom and grandma, but they did not believe me. A few weeks later, we switched sleeping positions on the bed. Now our feet were toward the closet, with me still by the edge of the bed. However, this time I would be parallel to both the space where my grandpa used to sleep and the sliding glass door to the backyard. I took a nap after school one evening and was awakened to the same uneasy feeling I had felt the night with the figures. I lifted my head and saw that most of my blanket was off of me and had fallen over to the side of the bed. I tried to pull it back up, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if someone or something had a grip on it and was playing tug-of-war with me from below. After a few frustrating and unsuccessful pulls, I fully sat up and looked over and down the side of the bed. To my surprise, I saw that there was nothing there. I tried pulling the blanket again and was able to easily pull the rest of the blanket up. The more I thought about it, the more strange it was. This happens to be the floor space where my grandpa used to sleep when he was alive. Again, just like the first incident, I was not scared, just very confused. I told my mom and grandma, but once again, they did not believe me. Either that, or maybe they were just trying to help me overcome both incidents by dismissing what I had experienced. They questioned if I was scared, and I remembered saying no. I could tell that answer gave them a lot of comfort. A few years later, as I went through my grandma's photo albums with her, I found a picture of my grandpa when he was younger and healthy. He was wearing a fedora hat and a long trench coat, posing exactly like one of the figures I had seen that night. I am now almost 40, and although these incidents do not scare me, I refuse to sleep with my blanket hanging off the side of the bed. I can still vividly see the figures and how they were posed around the room when I close my eyes. I can still see the indentations on the blanket from the polling that day. I like to hope that my grandpa had just missed us, so he paid us visits, and I just happened to come across his path. He probably came through in a way where he knew his little granddaughter would not be afraid because he knew how much she was missing him. I've recently learned that I'm gifted and spiritually sensitive with having many other encounters to this day, but I will leave them for another time to tell. To my grandpa, it's been 31 years since you left us, and Dad is with you now. I hope you both have found each other and are at peace. Please continue to watch over us. We love and miss you every day. Story 2. My brother and sister-in-law had issues, and it became exhausting listening to them. Every time they argued, she would leave and then he would go back and get her. And then they would argue again. She would leave again and he would go back and get her. It's a cycle that is just toxic, and I did not want to live with that anymore. I told my mom that it was affecting me mentally and emotionally living with them. My parents agreed for me to live with my uncle and grandpa while they looked for a new place. That was when I moved in temporarily with my uncle and grandpa. My uncle is divorced and would either go out all the time or he would stay in his room to talk to his girlfriends from Laos. My grandpa moved in when my grandma passed. My uncle's house was the perfect size for just the two of them, with room to host a guest. My cousin or uncle's daughter would occasionally stay over when it's her dad's weekend, which is why I thought it was a good idea to move in with them. If you're from North Minneapolis and know about the Cub Foods grocery store on Broadway, then you know how run down that neighborhood is. My uncle lived just a block away from that Cub Foods. Their house was a split entry house. My grandpa and uncle both slept upstairs and they hardly ever go downstairs. There are 2 empty rooms and a bathroom downstairs. They used those rooms as storage, so when I moved in, I had to clean the downstairs to make it livable. It smelled like old wet socks down there, so I had candles lit all the time. Not to mention, there was a mice infestation going on, so there's that. The first couple of weeks of living there was fine. On some occasions, I would have to be home alone when both of them were gone, and that was something I did not like. It was always so quiet that it's unnerving. The room next to mine was a storage room where they kept some of my grandma's things. I kept that door closed whenever I was in my room. I also did not know how to drive, so I would have to call my sisters to come pick me up to run errands or call my mom to pick me up when no one else was home. I refused to stay alone in that house. It was about a week before Thanksgiving when something strange happened to me. I was awoken by a loud cry from outside my window. The thing was, it didn't sound like a normal baby cry or anything like that. You know the cry that older women do at funerals? It sounded like that, but it sounded like a baby doing it. Regardless, it was scary as hell. I stayed in bed for a while waiting for that sound to go away. But it didn't. It got louder. I checked the time. It was around 2 a.m. My heart pounded as the cry got louder and longer. I eventually walked closer to the window to see if there was someone or something outside. My hands reached out for the curtains. I gripped it, but paused. I realized that I was too scared and just couldn't get myself to open it. I turned around to go back to bed, and when I did, I found that my door was ajar. I walked up to close it, and that's when I saw the door next room open. I did not dare to investigate. I quickly closed my door and went back to bed. All of this was happening while the cry was still going on in the background. It was still just as loud and eventually started to sound like a grown woman's cry. I grabbed my headphones, blasted my music, and forced myself to fall back to sleep. I woke up the next morning and found that the door to the next room was still open like what I saw last night. I walked out, closed that door quickly, and ran for the bathroom to get ready for the day. My cousin happened to be visiting that week, so when I went upstairs, I told her about my experience the night before. She said it might have been a cat or something like that. I have never heard a cat cry, so I didn't have anything to base that theory off on. I tried to shove it out of my mind and spent the whole day upstairs with my cousin and grandpa. On Thanksgiving Day, I told my aunt and mom about what I heard, and they just told me it's nothing, to ignore it, and that it was probably just a cat crying. Thanksgiving came and went. I haven't experienced anything else since that night. I trusted my family and made myself believe that what I heard was a cat's cry. The room next door remained closed, and nothing felt out of place. It was that way until Christmas came around. My family and I like to get together the weekend before Christmas to do our annual family dinner and open some gifts together. My uncle had gone to Thailand, my cousin was at her mom's, and my sister was on her way to pick up my grandpa and I from the house. I was getting ready in my room when I kept hearing small scratches in the wall next to me. That wall is connected to the room next door. Thinking it's just mice in the walls, I ignored it. The scratches were going up and down the wall. It got to the point where it actually spooked me, so I quickly changed my outfit and grabbed my gifts to go upstairs. I was about to walk out of my room when my grandpa came down asking where my niece and sister were. I asked him what he was talking about. He said he heard a baby crying, so he thought my sister was here. I just stared at him, and he just stared at me. Then he let out an awkward laugh and said that it was nothing. My grandpa wasn't a shaman that performs rituals, but he had spirit guides. Spirit guides are usually ancestors that act like a protection barrier for that person. They often give obvious signs when something needs to be communicated. I can tell that he knew something but did not want to tell me. We left it at that and waited for my sister to come. After that day, I did not experience anything else. I moved out about a month or two later. Eventually, my grandpa grew sick and was in and out of the hospital. His health declined rather rapidly. Sadly, in 2018, he passed. He spent the last of his days at my uncle's house with his loved ones around him. The elders did not want him to pass away in the house, so it seemed like he was fighting. If you know what a death rattle is, that's what he was doing on his last day. A death rattle is the sound that someone close to dying makes as there is a mucus buildup in their throat because their body no longer has strength to clear it. Most people associate it with drowning. It was a horrible sound to hear, and you can see the distress in him. We called an ambulance to take him to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. My uncle sold his house after the funeral as both of his parents also passed in the house. Some Hmong folks believe that family members may notice an increase in paranormal activities in the house when someone living there is going to pass. It is especially common to hear crying noises. Most of the time, it sounds like crying cats or babies. These are actually Bonzong monsters hanging around because they know someone is going to pass. I haven't set foot in that house since the funeral. I no longer live in Minneapolis, so I no longer had a need to drive past the house. I don't know who lives in that house now, but I want to know if they've experienced anything or if that was just me. Story 3. This story takes place in Kansas City. I was at a friend's house until 10 p.m. when my mom called me to go home. My friend lived kind of close to me. It was only a 15-minute walk, so I decided that I would be fine walking home. Everything was fine until I reached the lake between our homes. That was when I felt like something was following me and watching me. I picked up the pace, walking faster toward my house. As I neared home, I noticed my vision was depleting. I felt the space around me get darker and darker, and suddenly I felt like I was going to faint. The energy around me also changed. I felt as though every step I took was my spirit slowly leaving my body. I finally made it home okay, and I brushed off that horrible feeling. The next day, I went into my bathroom to do my usual skincare routine when all of a sudden I heard someone whispering, "Law J, come home." I got kind of spooked, but I continued with my skincare routine. Then out of nowhere, something punched my shower curtains. I yelled out my sister's name because she usually messes around with me. When I didn't hear a response like I expected, I threw the curtains open to check if anyone was behind it. To my surprise, there was no one behind the curtains. A chill ran through my spine as I ran upstairs, crying to my mom. Something is inside the house and I do not feel safe. I told her what happened, but you know how parents are. They either don't believe you or tell you it's nothing so that you don't get scared. She did end up letting me sleep with her for a few days. Soon after, my grandma learned of what happened, so she called me saying that I needed to move back to Minnesota before something bad happens to me when it finds me again. Eventually, I did move back to Minnesota. I was happy and felt some of my spirit becoming full again. Upon my return, my grandpa and grandma hosted an Onning ritual for me. The purpose of this ritual was to find the cause of the unexplained event that happened to me. I had to stay downstairs for them to set everything up. It was pretty boring, but I at least had some company down there. Hours passed and the shaman table and ritual area was finally set up. I cautiously walked upstairs to the smell of incense sticks. I noticed a pig lying behind the bench. I sat down with the shaman as she wrapped a rope around me. After that, she kept throwing the split buffalo horns on the ground repeatedly. The split horn is a divination tool used by the shaman to interpret a spirit's message or gain insight into the spirit world based on how and where the horns land. I felt nauseous and I felt like I was going to faint. The shaman spat water on me, saying something in Hmong. When a shaman spits water on you, that water is meant to cleanse you of negative spirits or illnesses. Note that I am unfamiliar with the Hmong culture and could barely speak my language, so it was extremely hard for me to follow what the shaman was doing, let alone what she was even saying. After the shaman did her thing, everyone ate. My aunt then whispered to me, "Do you want to know what happened?" I was curious, so I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Through the ritual, the shaman was able to explain what happened. My aunt translated the shaman's message that there was a little spirit boy that noticed me through my window in Kansas. The little boy thought I was very, very beautiful. He also noticed my sadness and became attracted to that, so he transformed himself into a robin and followed me home. I felt a little spooked, but I was relieved that everything was over. Or so I thought. A couple of weeks have passed before something strange happened to me again. My uncle was out late. Our rooms are downstairs, and that night I was playing video games on my laptop. I had lost track of time, but I knew it was around 2 a.m. The night was dead silent, and everyone was sleeping. All of a sudden, I heard the basement door open and shut loudly. I thought that maybe my uncle had come home and that he was just his usual drunk self. I lowered my volume only to hear soft whimpers and mumbles as if someone was hurt and crying, but it wasn't my uncle's voice. I climbed into my bed slowly and quietly, not knowing what the hell was out there. My area downstairs didn't have doors or walls. I had these big curtains to section off my small area that I called my room. I looked between the curtains and saw my aunt, but she didn't look good. She seemed to be limping and looked like she was drenched in water. I saw her go into my uncle's room and it scared me because that just seemed so not like her. The next morning, I asked my aunt if she went into my uncle's room last night. She looked at me confused and told me no. My stomach dropped and I told her what happened. Not too long after, she hosted another oneng to see what was up with the house and our family. It turns out that there were entities who were entertained by the arguing and anger that had been going on in the house, and they've latched onto us. What freaked me out the most was that the girl I thought was my aunt was a mimic of my aunt. Thank you for listening to Mix in the Dark. I am your host, MaiYang. Mix in the Dark is available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast series. If you have a story that you would like to share, please send it to myxinthedark@gmail.com. If there's a story that you really enjoyed, feel free to hit up my tip jar on Venmo. Just search Mix in the Dark on the business tab.